Welcome to the next episode of Unstructured Unlocked. I'm co-host Michelle Gouveia, joined by co-host Chris Wells, and our special guest today, Jim DeMarco. We are live at Insurtech Insights New York in a new room that's got better sound for you. So welcome, Jim, to the podcast. I think you two have known each other for a while through the work between Microsoft and Indico. Yeah. So love to understand the background on that a little bit. And Jim, a little bit on your background as well.
Yeah, Jim, you're, as I recall, head of insurance strategy for Microsoft.
Right.
And that has been the context of most of our conversations, except occasionally sipping bourbon together and discussing all matters philosophical and otherwise.
As is appropriate with bourbon, does that make sense?
But I may know a lot about you, but our audience doesn't. So why don't you tell them what's up with you and what you're into these days?
Oh, all right. Well, thank you. So Jim DeMarco, I'm the Director of Insurance Strategy for Microsoft, which means I work in our worldwide financial services organization on how does Microsoft partner with and support the insurance industry all up. That would be working with our biggest customers in the insurance business, but also with some important strategic partners across the industry as well. Try to look at not just what's now, which,
right.
But also what's next, and also a little bit about what's after that, because insurance companies as an industry are the backpinning of everything. It's the old saying, the first thing you pay is the mortgage and the second thing you pay is the insurance.
Sure is.
And thank you, Sandra Bullock. But at the same time, insurance touches everything, but it's also known to be a fairly conservative business. So if we just focused on just sort of making sure the existing business works, we would not actually help move the needle. Interestingly, though, I think insurance is also one of the places where you see a lot of great innovation. This is where we actually saw data-driven decisioning.
That's right.
In the 1960s.
Yep.
The first heavy use of mainframes came from this patch, and we're starting to see a similar sea change, I think, now in the insurance industry as well, where we're starting to see more digital first play, the idea of actually having insurance embedded in other human interaction. And so our ability to work with carriers and with strategic partners on how to move that needle for the industry and sort of make what's next real is really kind of what we get the privilege at Microsoft to do, because we touch everybody, but our ability to sort of help people is where we're at. Particularly excited to work with these guys because while we're a really good platform company, we make a lot of the platforms that sort of underlie a lot of how technology works and how you run things. We also don't do everything ourselves. And one of the cool things is to get the opportunity to work with some of the real innovators in the marketplace around how do we change the nature of interaction, for example, which is one of the things Indico Data has been fantastic at. Not for nothing, Microsoft's really good at what we do, but we didn't write the seminal white paper on generative AI. We are a heavy investor and a good partner for it, but there's a really good opportunity for us to work with folks like this. It's a very long-winded response to "Hi, Jim," but that's where it is.
No, it's good. Before we jump to one of my favorite topics, Indico, and of course myself. Could we talk a little, that was all very, grand, and you're doing big things and having big ideas, but what's the day-to-day like for Jim DeMarco? What are you doing to push all of that forward?
It starts with waking up because the cat got me up a little bit too early in the morning. Our day-to-day is, you have no idea. But our day-to-day really is focused in on working directly with the largest insurance companies in the world, and some of the sort of the other insurance companies out as well, on understanding everything from where is their business going, that is to say, what's the nature of the larger business, but also then what are the sort of fundamental things that impact us. So we work really closely on things like climate change and how do we handle the role of climate change. Is particularly timely given that we're in New York right now. The orange skies of New York right now.
Blade Runner.
But with that said, we're actually looking at how do we use technology to shift the market to at being ready for imminent risks and how do we respond to imminent risks, whether in this case fire, but certainly flood risk, weather risk, and so forth. So it's one of the things we get to sort of look at and work on is how do we provide that shift in the industry from some sort of repair, replace to sort of more the predict, prevent kind of thing. That's really the day job. We get to actually work on that. At the same time, we also work on things like public policy around cyber insurance and how do we sort of understand or work with the industry to help. Cyber is a great example because it's totally a team sport, right? We have to make sure it's good fighting the bad guys together, and how do we actually help people protect themselves? Yeah. And then the third thing and last to answer on the day job and the things that we really try to work on is how do we take and understand how the business is actually run. So part of my day job is really sitting down and actually saying, what is, particularly generative AI, it's been rather on people's minds, how does that change the nature of what it means to be an underwriter, or the nature of it means to be a claim handler, or the nature of the CFO? And that is a conversation that I've literally on a daily basis with customers. It's cool.
So you're sitting at kind of, you're helping develop and influence strategy. So at the high level, these big conversations at the industry level, and then also a little bit of stepping under the hood and saying, here's what we can do to help you execute once you've identified and developed that strategy.
Yeah, it's a fun job, and I got it. You can't have it. Yeah.
When do you sleep, though?
Yeah. I mean, that's a big mandate, right?
Whenever the cat lets me.
Oh, right, the cat.
Yes.
That's right.
But
the cat's the limiting factor.
It's really kind of cool. We have a nice thing about Microsoft is we do reach everybody. That's the good news. It's also somewhat the bad news, because when you do reach everybody, you have no ability to do a lot of the very, very specific. So while we talk about the general strategy, and we also work on how do we implement, like execute a plan, and how do you create a transformative moment for a business or for an industry, that's really cool. The arms and legs of deploying that change are things that, thank God we have an army, right? So there's that. The other side of that, though, is also, as broad a view as we have, we don't have necessarily always the very specific view. And so Microsoft as an organization, we're a platform company. So our view is we can provide a lot of the technology and a lot of the sort of the reach, capability, and scale that is required to really, be that fulcrum to lever the world. But we don't always have the ability to really get focused on, here's how I change this thing, or here's how do I drive something. I think an analogy that we've talked about together and share with the folks here listening at home is we're kind of like the Lego set. We have the big green thing, at the bottom, it gets dusty on the floor. We've got the 2x2s and the 2x3s and the 1x1s that always get stuck in the dishwasher.
I hate those things.
Yeah. But we don't make the Harry Potter Hogwarts train set. We don't have the ability to sort of look at that. We work with our customers and we work with partners. One of the really cool things I like about working with these guys is they're really good at.
He's pointing at you, the Indico.
I know.
You are.
Oh, no. Oh, gosh.
You are Indico Data.
This is getting edited out, for sure.
But one of the things we love is they have the ability to sort of do the higher value add, to do the thing about actually understanding what is the business process? How do I look at document ingestion? How do I look at the ability to create a flow through? And how do I create the edges that use some of the technologies Microsoft has, some of the technologies that you have natively, and sort of carry it to the solutioning that actually solves the problem? I have the privilege of being able to talk about what the problem is. I have a great opportunity to actually sort of help identify the parameters and constraints around how you look at a problem and sort of try to solve it. And I have a lot of platform technologies. We have a very strong relationship with a number of partners, Indico included, that actually then try to go solve those problems. And what's really cool, one of the cool things about working with Indico, Chris in particular, is these guys actually understand the problem really stupid well too. So there's that.
Yeah, and I would say, I'll make a confession here. I've been at Indico 2.5 years. When the sort of seeds of the Microsoft partnership were starting to get planted a year or so ago, I was like, Microsoft, we're like this trendy startup doing cool AI stuff, and they're this dinosaur megalith, right? And I could not have been more wrong, honestly. Like the the support, the collaborative nature of the relationship, and also the, like, as you described, very clear boundaries between what Microsoft is, what Indico is, and how that sort of building on top of the platform really adds value. I'll also confess that the reason we understand the problem is that we've stubbed our toes on every corner of every piece of furniture that there is in taking AI to production in the enterprise. And all of that toe stubbing we've baked into our platform. And you can build a lot of high value stuff through that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. One of the things, and I'm not going to sit here pitching Microsoft all day. One of the things that is really kind of cool, Satya Nadella, our CEO, says, you don't come to Microsoft to be cool, you come to Microsoft to make other people cool. And like that. Being an alpha geek myself, I'm pretty happy with that. And one of the coolest things here is that we actually like to partner up with people who actually can make things work and make sort of really, help people achieve more. And this is a really cool thing. In the insurance industry, lots to change, lots of cool things that need to happen. And there's a great opportunity for us to sort of change that, help the industry as it transforms itself. So I'm very excited to talk also a little bit about that, because I get to play with that every day. So.
I love that you're like, Microsoft is going to make anything in the insurance industry cool, right? Those two words, people are starting to think it's cool. Jim, we talk a lot about on this podcast about the underwriting workflow, the claims workflows, the challenges there with data and automation, and how do you improve those processes? I have a little bit of knowledge just from my time in the insurance carriers of what some of that might look like. There's some differences that happen between carriers, but on the larger scale, a lot of those challenges are the same. What do you find when you're having these conversations with your partners? Is it similar challenges? Is it depending on where they are in their innovation or their digital transformation that they're looking for different things? Is it very different as you're talking to these partners?
Yeah. I forgive an analogy because I think in them sometimes, but insurance company situations seem to be like snowflakes. They're all unique, but they basically follow 8 patterns, right?
Okay.
There are certain patterns that you see in the market more generally. And so the answer to your question, I'm afraid, Michelle, is frequently it depends.
It's my favorite answer when Chris asks me a question.
Yeah, I never get a straight answer from anybody anymore.
Yeah, you put things on the internet, what can I say? Okay.
At least you didn't start your answer with as an AI language model.
Yeah.
Yes, allow me to respond now. Let me ask. Hey, ChatGPT. No, really, seriously speaking, what we find is that people look to technology to change things, but technology just accelerates things. We have to understand the business process that we're trying to solve for. And every carrier seems to be in a somewhat unique position vis-a-vis their own journey. That said, I would also say that there are patterns of journeys that are very, very similar. For example, if I'm looking at, say, commercial property casualty claims, I know that if I have a fire claim, I'm going to have certain things that are going to come in. I'm going to have, the certificates, the damage estimates, the building value estimates, the issues on what's the commercial value impact, and so forth and so on. And a lot of it's going to be a heck of a lot of documents that are going to come in, and I need to understand what all that's going to be. And I'm going to have some poor schlep who has to sit there and look through all those documents and understand, those documents and say, key up, this is what's happening, and so forth and so on. And a lot of commercial property casualty is still done in that manner. Some people have more sophisticated approaches to that. Some of them are using automated document ingestion. Some people are using commercial front-end software like a CRM to actually sit there and do stuff. But at the end of the day, the pattern or the business practice is I need to figure out what went wrong, what's the peril, and whether or not I have coverage and how much it is.
Right.
And that's where we have to sort of ask the question, what problem are we trying to solve for? Am I trying to just solve for the problem of I want to ingest a bunch of documents, or am I trying to solve for the problem of I need to understand my liability quickly and at the least cost possible so that I can have the optimal result for client and firm? And when we start to decompose the business process, that's when we bring in the technology.
Okay.
I gave you, again, long-winded answers. I'm afraid that's just my brand.
It's less talking than we
I was
have to
going
do.
to say,
It's
it works
fine.
for us. Yeah.
Jim's coming back every week.
Yeah.
Oh God, not for anybody who listens to this
Yeah.
podcast.
No, but we've talked about that too,
We have.
where if you automate a broken process,
Yeah.
it stays broken. It's just it breaks faster.
That's right.
I think is
Yeah,
what Chris said.
That's right.
Yeah, Peter Drucker, the management guru,
Yeah.
everybody knows him for Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast. His best quote is that nothing is worse than improving that which had never been done in the first place.
Yeah, no, so I talked about stubbing toes and getting to production with AI. One of the things our platform allows you to do is sort of like memorialize your process in an AI assisted, AI augmented and accelerated workflow. But we always caution people as we're helping them get up and running, like, is this really the process that you want to memorialize forever and just let the robots run? And we've started to build out capabilities for professional services to help people that have never really done change management on a back office, process to think the right thoughts and crystallize the right process.
That's actually one of the things that I do the most with my customers in terms of back to what's the day job.
Yeah.
My team, what we try to actually go do is just understand the current and intentional process for things, because given to quotes, I guess Einstein was asked. Einstein says, "If I had an hour to solve a problem."
You keep pulling these out, though.
Is someone fact checking this?
Yeah.
These are
In
real
real time.
Somewhere on here, there's generative AI going, "Here's your next quote, Jim." But Einstein said, "If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes on the solution."
Yeah.
And the reason for that was, his rationale is, if you can decompose the problem to actually what you're trying to solve for, you find that the solution actually comes. If you just start right into solving the problem, you end up solving a piece part and not actually getting to the end. Yeah. So when you guys are sitting talking with your customers and they're going, "Hey, I really want to handle this really cool thing about using tech to actually make it so that I don't have to have an army of people sitting there hand coding responses," the moment is actually the part of the challenge really is, well, that's a piece of the overall problem. The problem, the KPI I'm going for is I need to get to a fast decision that's accurate. Okay, now let's look at how do we solve it.
We just talked about this on another episode with Brandy from Indico, where she was talking about when she's having these conversations with the customers and launching pilots or starting the engagement of, well, the customer says, this is what we want to solve for, this is what we want to measure. And a part of Brandy's role is having to roll it back and say, but to get there, you're really trying to solve for X, right? And you will eventually get to that metric, but what's important is solving the smaller piece, or the sprite piece, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
The decomposition of the problem into its piece parts, and then providing the right flow. Yeah, it's just all that math we did back when we were kids. Turns out
we were kids.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Sorry.
When you were a kid, maybe for me it was a long time ago. We were still using stone slates back then. But I didn't want to say that because I couldn't remember the word itself. But seriously, that construct of making a big problem into a smaller one and then understanding what's the intentional flow, that is the essence of transformation in many respects.
Incremental improvement and innovation to get to the pie in the sky state.
Yeah, and at the same time, as an aside from what I do for Microsoft, I teach graduate school and I teach digital transformation.
Bless your heart.
It's my poor students.
I wasn't sure where that was going. I have a side hustle.
I'm sorry. It's like, oh, by the way, here, allow me to show you my company. But what I see is we work on digital transformation for large and small companies as part of this course. Mm-hmm. And what I see, and I continually get the response, people think, oh, digital transformation is I'm bringing all these new technologies. Like, stop. Mm-hmm. Digital transformation starts with, where is your business? What are the things that are changing that business? And then how do you look at yourself in the future and look at the business intent? It is a strategy around What am I trying to change for my business or my industry? And then come at how I leverage that technology. And that for me is the essence of how I get there. And then if you're going to do it, then you have a roadmap. And that's where you pull in small piece here, larger piece there, and so forth. And then sort of create that flywheel effect of change.
Right.
I think a lot of people too, one of the criticisms of the insurance industry, right, is that it's so slow moving, right, to innovate, to change. And I think, Jim, the point you just made is a perfect one, in that you have to do it incrementally, because these insurance carriers are enterprises that have been around for many, many, many years with their own legacy systems or technologies, that it takes time to deload all of the information, the data that's there, to get it into a place that can be part of a digital transformation, but even to move it in a way that data stays, structured the way it is or has been used in the past. A lot of different systems are siloed. They need to start talking to each other again. I think once startups or people understand that, it becomes a much more, to your point, digestible challenge to say this strategy will take us 5 to 10 years to execute. But if we start doing this now, we'll start to see
stream of reward.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm sorry for this dad joke, but I think the emphasis has been on the wrong syllable in digital transformation, and that transformation is the thing, right? The digital is an implementation detail, frankly.
Technology is an accelerant.
Exactly.
And while there are certain technologies that are such accelerants and touch so many things that they can be considered transformative in and of themselves, at the end of the day, it's still solving for a human or a business process.
That's right.
And that, from our perspective, means really come back to what are we trying to do? Where are we trying to go? Back to your point, Michelle, and like a lot of insurance companies, insurance has a sort of please forgive me, a little philosophical here, but insurance has historically been built around understanding specific risks. And customers were categorized and bucketed into risks. That's how we risk pool, right? That's the whole point of the exercise in some respects. But as a result, we have a very product-driven, risk-driven model where you are, as a customer to me, you would be a set of risks associated with it. And I tell you a product that is this package of risks. If you wanted to buy another product from me, you're a second customer to me in many respects.
Right.
Because that product has its own sort of bucket analysis of risks and so forth and so on. So one of the fundamental challenges that insurance companies have run into is they address it as we need to bundle. Bundling is a symptom of the broader problem. So I need to actually understand my customers and what they're trying to do.
Right.
And then if I say the talk of going customer centric as an industry requires us to sort of rethink fundamentally what is our operating model and our operating intent. And that is a change in not just process, that's a transformation of mindset as a business.
Yeah.
I had this great conversation with an insurance company a number of years ago. Actually, I was sitting in on a conversation with the board of one of these companies, and they're talking back and forth about all these cool things they want to do with technology. And I kind of raised my hand in the middle of the meeting and said, "So, just out of curiosity, you guys have a customer model?" The chief marketing officer leaned forward, looked the CIO square in the eye, and said, "I told you so." It was really cool. It was kind of like being an Altamont at that point. It was like, hey, look, there's a big fight. But it was really, really cool to understand there's a fundamental understanding that customers don't belong to products. Products are things that support customers. And when somebody comes to an insurance company, they're asking for protection or advice or something about their own personal lifestyle, their business or whatnot. And the insurance companies themselves have to sort of really realize that that becomes the center of the process. The process is a human or a business trying to achieve something rather than somebody that's coming to look to buy a product off of me. And that's a fundamental sea change in terms of how we look at our systems, our processes, and our integrations with others. And if I'm sending you a bunch of documents and I'm saying, here's my stuff, I don't want to say, oh, fit that document into my processes. No, this guy's actually trying to do something. And that's where you see, I think, the difference between good and great in 5 years from now in the industry.
Are you seeing carriers have to, as they're making this transition, have to re-educate the customer Because this is not the way the customer has come up to the counter and asked for the product historically either.
It's not, but there's a great analogy in to all of this. About 25 years ago, the telco industry did exactly the same thing.
Okay, interesting.
Because everybody, you just subscribed to a plan. Remember that? And then we started offering things like bundles, and then you could actually do multiple things with your cell phone, and then you had to like do more and more services. But this turns out you started thinking less about like, what are the services I'm putting out to the market and how do I make profit on those services, but now how do I look at my customers?
Yeah, okay.
So there is actually the customer. I think insurance companies more generally, we have a mindset in the industry that we sort of understand risk really well. And no question, the insurance industry does.
Yep.
But understanding that customers don't think in terms of risk, they think in terms of how do I run my bakery? How do I make sure that I can get my kids to school? How can I plan for my kids' college education? Or how do I actually drive a car? How can I actually make sure I can go drive a car? Those are what the customers, the humans, are actually trying to achieve.
I guess I've never looked at actuarial tables before I went to buy car insurance. That's a good point.
There is that,
They also keep them very secret, so you wouldn't find them even if you looked.
Congratulations, you are in this box.
Oh, great.
But I think too, that's probably why there's so much conversation and interest in the embedded insurance model, right? Because you're bringing those insurance products to the point of where the customer is in a lot of times, and that's they're looking for a product. You're meeting them where they are, even if they may not even realize they need the product, but it's there. There's that synergy of, oh, I'm buying this. It makes sense to have this, and I think that's why you're seeing such high demand for that, because it's a lot of lifestyle products. I've seen a lot of insurance that's like, oh, you're going on a snowboarding trip, you should buy accident insurance.
Okay, amazing.
Plus travel delay, plus Uber insurance, plus. And exactly to your point. Yeah, that is a sea change.
Yeah.
But that is also a sea change where insurance is supporting a human doing something, as opposed to, oh, wait a minute, I need to go to insurance to go do this.
Exactly, yeah.
There will always be a world where I need to have a financial backstop if my building burns to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
That is true, because at some point or another, if I don't have insurance and I have a house and all my money's in my house, and my house burns down, I'm kind of in trouble. That is very true. But when we see now people traveling, or we start to see the idea of embedding insurance in a product with the warranty embedded. We can skip the details on warranty insurance, but the construct still is the same. It is something that supports another human transaction. And that, I think, is where we have to really now think insurance is a slightly different thing, right? It's now much smaller. It's much more rapid. It has to be something that fits into something that a human can go do. There's some really, really cool stuff out there, like travel delay insurance.
I've used it.
You've used travel delay insurance?
Yes.
Did you get your $50 for your dinner?
I did,
or your
and it was parametric. So it was triggered just by the data that said the train is late. Here is your reimbursement for that ticket.
And look at Michelle's face lighting. It's about parametric insurance.
Insurance geek. I know.
Yeah,
I know.
That was great.
Yeah. For the 17 people who know what parametric insurance is, that's awesome. That's also, I think, the right digital model in a lot of respects, because what it does is it gets us away from this construct of I need to think about 400 years of loss history. Down to it is a small, simple transaction that supports a human doing something. You getting on a train, going someplace. Right? And that is, now that's how we talk about transformation in the business. Now, when we talk about that, that means we have to, there's nobody who could underwrite that manually. Parametric insurance, you needed to have the parameters set.
Yeah, you need to have the data feed. It needs to be automatic. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that means that's where tech comes in. Mm-hmm. And I think that's exactly, I guess, the point of your podcast. Tech is now supporting a completely different process. Now it's supporting plugging in so that you can go someplace, right? We talked with somebody about trying to put together a plan for Coachella insurance, right? All of the different things that go into my experience.
See, look at Jim's face light up when he's talking about Coachella.
Let's just say that's not what I do on my off time. But,
the cat won't let you go to Coachella.
Pretty much, some stodgy old professor. But at the same time, the construct becomes now looking at how do I slipstream that into a human process. There's some people who are absolutely phenomenal at this in the industry, and surprisingly not always the startups. Where it's Insurtechs are going to. No, these are actually some of the biggest carriers are doing some of the really coolest stuff. Travel delay insurance was that was one of the largest reinsurers, I think, who invented that. And
that's cool.
But it takes a mindset shift, and it really comes down to finding the right business process and then asking the question, how do I put the technology into it? Yep. What that means for us tech players, for guys like you and me, is it means we have to be super quick. We have to have stuff that's easily scaled and easily deployed. Right. And then we need to have stuff where it can be just, I learn from this and I grow it and I grow the next and I grow the next, which is, again, we start looking at back to sort of what's the core bread and butter of like, how do I use AI in insurance? Then we have to understand that it has to be understandable, rapid, easy to understand, easy to use, easy to scale. And then I don't need to train an army of data scientists in how to use this stupid thing. Right? And not that data science isn't a wonderful experience. I got a daughter who's a data scientist, but what they're shifting more and more toward now is understanding how, really good data scientists are people who can understand what's a human process so they can actually configure how that works. Right.
Yeah.
You touched on the major topic. I mean, here at the conference, it's been keynote speakers and panels on generative AI. It's the big topic of the conference.
The flavor of the day.
The flavor of the day, yes.
Flavor of
probably the next
years.
5 to 10 years. Yes, exactly. This is a game changer.
We've talked about it a little bit on the podcast, but would love to get your thoughts, Jim, on how do you go about deploying those capabilities? I mean, AI. We've talked about AI's been around for a while. Like companies have been using it, but now there's all of this attention on it because individuals can use it, can access it, and those capabilities. And how do they get to do that, right? What are the concerns? What are the things they have to be worried about? What do carriers need to think about when they're looking to deploy solutions with these capabilities? And both of your thoughts on it. I mean, you guys are much more experts in that space than I am.
Well, I think I'll actually deflect that question and ask Jim a related question before I give my answer, which is we've heard from a number of carriers like here and in recent conversations saying things to us like, oh, GPT's here. Why would we need a solution like yours? And I wonder if part of that I think is, part of it I think is hype. Part of it I think is the usual sort of business mindset that here's a technology, we're going to technology all the things. And then part of it I think is just wishful thinking, but I would love to know if you've had similar conversations and how you answer that question.
I've heard everything from Skynet is now self-aware. This AI stuff's going to kill us all, which I think is perhaps a bit
that seems to be making headlines.
It does.
Yeah.
Come with me if you want to live, Jim.
Yeah, it's a bit on one edge. On the other edge, I have seen this stuff's never going to work.
No, okay.
And on the sort of the other piece of it, I think we've seen is use this for what? And it's actually the use this for what is probably the most interesting of those three responses, because this is kind of not self-aware. This is narrow AI. We can talk deep details about the construct, but it's taking the technology. Generative AI is taking it's taking drudgery out of work, right? It's got the ability to reduce the use of rote task.
Yeah.
Great. Back to our earlier sort of philosophical conversation about how does all this stuff work. Right. We're still thinking the problem is what's the business problem or technical human problem we're trying to solve. Right. So back to sort of what we're seeing and hearing in that space then is the questions that come to me from customers, and quite literally on a daily basis now, is what can I use this tech for?
Yeah. Okay.
And my response back is, it varies, but my responst back for...
It depends.
Depends, of course.
I didn't want to give the consultant's answer, but thanks, Michelle.
You're teaming up on me. This is not how this podcast usually goes.
I have my pen. I'm going to write down the number of times we say depends in the conversation. But as it comes out, the response I give is we need to actually understand the business processes we're coming at, and then understand from there what I can use the technology to achieve. So I actually sit down and sit with customers and want to talk about generative AI. These are sort of three basic pillars to the response. Pillar one is the use cases. What am I trying to do? Pillar two is a technology play, because this is tech.
Yeah.
You have to deploy it. You also have to deploy it securely, scale both vertical and horizontal. So vertical as in I need to use a lot more of it sometimes, and horizontal as in I can use it for more things. Yeah. So I have that piece. I mentioned security. I'm going to come back to that with 3 or 4 more times. I might as well do as many tick marks on security as I can on it depends, because it's really, really important.
Yeah.
Everything from regulatory, we're working with customer data. Right. We're working with, sometimes really super sensitive data, PII, PHI, PXI, if you will. And there's elements of all of that. So the technology deployment model has to be done right. And just saying, I'm just going to go use ChatGPT to do it. I mean, Microsoft is very well known. We're a huge investor in OpenAI. Yeah. But at the same time, we need to have industrial grade scale if we're an insurance company. We need to have highly compliant approach to things if we're the thing.
And a system that's flexible and nimble enough to change as the regulatory landscape changes.
Right. And that's actually where the third leg of the stool comes in. So use cases, technology, and governance. Yes. Exactly to your point. That third leg of the stool is doing it right. Then doing it right is a combination of responsible AI. It goes in with all of your compliance, your risk modeling, your compliance modeling, and how you actually operate as a business. There's great technology, whether we talk about generative AI or other cognitive AI, which is the other place where we see a heck of a lot of work coming in. There's a lot of things that you can do with that technology that, to quote the guy who's like a few layers above me in Microsoft, it can be a tool or it can be a weapon. Yeah. And it has to be done in a manner that is responsible. And that's when when I work with carriers, I say, those are the 3 legs of your stools. You need your list of use cases. You need the technology play to be done right. Get your data house in order. Get your integration pieces in order. Get your business processes laid out right. Make sure you're doing secure scale compute. And then, incredibly importantly, and I know a lot of companies and a number of insurance carriers miss this third leg of the stool, which is govern it properly, govern it ethically, have a real, at the board level or the C-level, have a governance committee for how you use technology in this way.
I would be remiss if I didn't point out to the listener that very little of what you just said is OpenAI specific. Like,
no,
this is true of any technology you buy. I also, and no offense to my insurance colleagues out there, but governance, I think, has long been a struggle in insurance companies, where every actuary has a model they run on their desktop with their own access database.
We're seeing a lot of movement now on the entrepreneurial side of companies coming forth with these governance and compliance solutions of here's how we can audit your models. We can have a track record that you have reviewed these, that there's no bias in your models. Where's that data coming from? We have the protections in place to secure that data. We have protocols and procedures if we need to eliminate that data from a model because of a state has said you can no longer use that in your underwriting or your pricing or.
Interesting. Okay.
We still have to do that regulatory episode.
We do have to do the regulatory episode. It's going to be a great one. If
there's anyone that does rates and filings work out there that's listening that wants to join, please do.
Yeah.
It comes up every time we talk about
really
this.
Does.
Well, it's interesting. So I'm going to jump in on your regulator thing, because actually one of the things we've been advocating as a business is to actually establish well-informed regulations around this. We have, within Microsoft, and this is one of our real distinct advantages or differences in the marketplace, we actually have a committee, an organization that actually sits there and looks at the use of AI, ours and our partners.
Nice.
And actually we create our own sort of self-regulating model around whether or not we will use a piece of AI, whether it's generative, cognitive, or deductive, machine learning. We actually go through and review project by project. Is this a project that could be, what's its intended use? What's the, is it fit for purpose? But then also, what are the potential unintended consequences?
Okay.
I worked with a partner, absolute phenomenal technology that was really, really cool. It actually has healthcare outcomes that could be very, very cool and very positive, both from an insurance perspective, but also just from a human surviving perspective.
Yeah, that's good.
Very cool piece of technology, but in certain circumstances, it can be used to discriminate against people.
Okay.
And so we said, we have actually stopped our partnership with them until they built an entire framework and guide rails around the responsible use of it to make sure that it could not be used in an inappropriate manner. And that's part of how you do this if it's done right. Insurance companies need this for compliance purposes, but they also need to do it just because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a place where we really want to work with customers. Not to pitch our partnership or nothing, but you actually have some really cool ideas around actually, because generative AI is part of the challenge in this. Because generative AI in and of its nature is a bit of a black box in terms of the outputs.
Oh, it's the blackest of black boxes.
But there are places where we can come in and actually provide traceability by actually sort of logging, handling outcomes, the flow through processing. That's actually some really cool stuff. So would you mind sort of talking through that a little bit? Because I think that's cool.
I'll give a funny anecdote first, and then maybe I'll talk a little bit about what we're building and what's coming out, even in the next few weeks. The funny anecdote, and I think this goes back to what you were saying, responsible AI is a super nuanced thing. And I'm glad that smart people like you all are working on it, because I think most people would put some pretty draconian and not very thoughtful rules in place. But even the rules that maybe are in place today could be a little more nuanced. So
You're gonna get in trouble for this?
No, I won't get in trouble with this. This will be fine. See you at my next company. I was trying to generate some synthetic data, rare data fields that were found in only a few documents that someone had used to train a model. So I said, well, I've got this big generative black box. Let me put the few examples I have in and get out a few that I can use, and then loop that back in, retrain the model. You get this like virtuous cycle, right? At least in theory. And there's this one field, and these were all like commercial real estate documents. There's this one field that I kept, like, it just errored out, and like it was bad software practice. I wasn't logging the messages very well. So I came in and I just sent one through, and it was like, you violated our terms. And it turns out this was about fair use of a building. And the like one example I had talked about brothels and sex workers. And so I was trying to do something very ethical, which is, help someone get a machine learning model that wasn't discriminating against anyone. And I got blocked because the filter, it was a very hard filter, right? Like the context of what I was doing was not part of making the decision about whether I should do it or not. And so there's work to do there, I would say.
It's kind of cool. So, and I'm loath to get into product details. And as a strategy guy for Microsoft, I'll probably get the product details wrong anyways. But
we'll go to our next company together, Jim.
The other side hustle.
I'll be here.
Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate that. We're going to need some investing quickly. One of the things that we do, people actually ask about sort of why, what is Microsoft with the OpenAI stack? One of the things that is inherent in what we do is our systems, we actually track input output on the use of generative AI. And we do not record. We actually have something that's just this quiet lister on the output of any trained model. So, model response, right? You know the tech better than I do. If certain things start to come out on the use of any given model, the system auto logs it and flags it.
Nice.
So,
is it recording? It is recording. Okay. Pick up where you left off, or something in that neighborhood. You're talking about the logging of outputs.
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things how the Azure OpenAI stack kind of sort of works, and for those of you who are listening in, please don't hold me to it. I'll get the text slightly wrong, but the general gist of it is this: when you're dealing with the use of any algorithm with cognitive or with generative AI, generative AI in particular, the system in the back end is just sort of letting it go, letting things happen, but it is holding back. We do not, in our contract, we will show that we we will sometimes stop and flag and auto-record something as an output, even though it is not our data. Because those people who use their data, they're doing their thing.
Yeah.
We will actually do a hold if there's an inappropriate use flag hit.
Okay.
So the idea of talking about sex workers may trigger that. It'll get logged.
Sorry, I'm in your
You've been
system.
flagged.
Yeah. And it'll get logged, flagged, and a human will actually have to look at it.
Okay.
Now, if a customer decides they don't want to have that logging, they can turn it off, but the only way they can turn it off is if they have an ethical AI program that does it themselves. So they actually have to have,
they have to prove this.
They have to prove they actually have their own structure in place for us to do it. And the point of the exercise here is that this tool is incredibly powerful. These tools, you guys helped develop the very first of these tools. These tools are super, super powerful, but they can be used for inappropriate use even unintentionally. And so our ability to sort of make sure we're doing the right thing is, we find ourselves in a position where we have to self-regulate and self-police.
Yep.
That said, back to your thing, should we do something on regulation? I think the answer is yes, because we need to be working together with, whether it's, in the case of insurance, NAIC or IAIS, but also with the governments themselves on these things. I know there's the US government's working on this, the EU is working on this, the UK government's trying to work on how do we create the right standards and frameworks appropriately. And that's a place where we think is a great opportunity for public-private partnership as well.
Fascinating. So on that note, let me circle back to the original question you answered me, which is about where is this going within Indico. Indico's history, we were very early in generative models, and then we realized that the discriminative models at the time were more powerful, models that can't generate stuff, but they're good at finding stuff. Right. So we built a product on top of that. And that's nice because the discriminative models, the name's discriminative, like they don't misbehave, they're just finding what's in your document. If you use it for bad things downstream, well, that's on you. Like we just, again, bad process, we just helped you get there quicker, right? So we've taken that mindset, everything we've learned about, comparatively discriminative models are a bit of a gray box. They're not quite, coal black, like a large language model. We've taken that mindset to the large language model space, and we've said, okay, one of the things you have to do to build a scalable machine learning model is you have to label data. So let's use GPT-4 zero shot and just, help make it turn into a labeling engine. Like, do my labeling for me. I'll be QA instead of the highlighter on the page. And one of the things that changes there is you actually have to take its answers. It says, I found this, but it doesn't know where in the string the word started or where it ended. That's just not the kind of thing it does, right? So we have to go back and find it. And so it's a combination of prompt engineering, good old fashioned software engineering, and also just some heuristics to say, okay, we think we found it here. The model thinks it found it here. We can find it there. It's not a hallucination. Okay, good. Push that into the label. Let the human review it, right?
Now you have traceability.
Right? Which is huge, right? I came from financial services and data governance, and like the flow of why did I invest in this based on what I saw in the markets is like you have to have that. You have to be able to cite it chapter and verse, because someday an auditor's coming looking, right? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah, and also decision, in the insurance space, to tracking to why did I underwrite this way? Why did I actually determine what determination did I make about a claim? All of those different elements, those are all required traceability. So there's a compliance element, regardless of financial services industry sector, that you have to get to. And this has been a fundamental challenge as people start to look at this, like, oh, what can I do with it? Well, the cool thing is you can do an awful lot, but when you actually add in the ability to drive traceability on large language models, now we can think about how do we simplify tons of processes and still stay compliant.
Absolutely. And it gets even scarier when you leave the sort of realm of like, help me do discriminative stuff, but faster, to help me truly generate something novel. Like, here's a summary of the policy coverages that I've written so that I can compare with like the first notice of loss that came in, right? And with a little bit of work, you can actually do not just summarization, but you can do grounded summarization and have the model show its work, right? Like, I don't know whether I think these large language models can reason, but they can act like they're reasoning. And if you keep that, if you have the right mental model for how that works, you can sort of
Do a lot,
open up the
yeah.
box and you can see what's going on and why a decision was made and why this word followed that word, right?
And now you can doing this, you can simplify the business process.
100%.
You can squeeze it down so now it fits in with embedded insurance, with embedded finance, because now you can actually say, I can, for the easy stuff,
Yes.
I can have a fully traceable, fully understandable, relatively clean cut to the, to my target loss ratio approach to my business, where I'm not just taking my best guess, but I actually based upon the appropriate parameters. And then when there's stuff that's hard, then I can actually, that's where I bring in my humans.
Yep.
That's where I actually start doing the more
You've
decisioning
elevated their
stuff.
role.
Yeah. This is
It's only making human jobs better.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I love it that people say, Skynet is, Skynet is self-aware is kind of funny. By the way, we're going to eliminate 10,000 jobs doing this. We're just going to make 10,000 jobs a whole lot easier.
That's right.
And enable people to do more high value add work and a lot less drudgery, because now I don't have to have those people go sift through the document to find, is there a family history of heart attack? Yes, no. And I get back the answer, yes, no.
Right. And by the way, the turnover in those jobs is miserable, right? Because nobody wants to do that forever.
Yeah, exactly. And now I can let people get better, get more expert at what they do.
Yes.
There is a virtuous cycle in all of this if we do it right. But it still all boils back. You have to have the tech right. You got to get the use cases right. You got to understand what problems I'm trying to solve. And then if we don't do this in an ethical, responsible manner, we are not long for this world.
That's right. And I would say Microsoft and Azure OpenAI are at the forefront of that. At least just one man's opinion. But I do spend my day thinking about this.
Well, as my old mentor used to say, from your lips to God's ears.
There you go. Well, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. Any last words, Jim, for the audience?
Well, thank you for suffering through a conversation that involved me. But also, I have to say, I'm thrilled about the direction and the ability that we can take things. This really is because there are so many different places we can touch now with generative AI, because cognitive AI has finally become a mature product set as well. We now have the ability to really rethink the human process and simplify.
Yeah.
That for me is super exciting. Working with great partners who actually, can help push the thinking and also make it really work and bring it to life is fantastic. Yeah. I'm really excited. I'm an optimist generally, but I'm super optimistic about this.
Same.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jim. This has been another episode of Unstructured Unlocked. I'm co-host Chris Wells.
I'm co-host Michelle Gouveia.
And our guest today has been Jim DeMarco, who does all things strategy for insurance companies at Microsoft. One last thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Take care.